Brainfood as a community was really set up on three fundamental principles. The first being community. So it's wonderful to see so many people joining us again on another one of these events that we're doing. Lovely to see either your pictures or your videos, to see your faces. It's great to see so many with us. So community has always been the first part. The second part of Brainfood is about curiosity, which again is why we have these conversations. We like to get curious, we like to discover, we like to understand different aspects of this wonderful role that we all play in terms of helping our businesses and clients with leadership, with our learning. And then the third aspect that underpins Brainfood is about inspiration. Again, if we can take one thing away from these conversations that inspires us to go and do something different, then that's a great place to be. So want to say a real big thank you again for being here. There's people are already on the chat, which is great, saying hello to everybody, so love that. So without further ado, actually I forgot to introduce myself, actually, for those who've not met me before. So my name's Hayden. I'm one of the founders of Brainfood. There are several others on the call today, so Julia, Richard, Jen, Caroline are here with us as well, so they've been with us since the start. So yeah, we set up Brainfood last July, was our first event, and we've absolutely loved this growing community that we're creating. And we've got lots of people who've been with us throughout that journey as well. So thank you for your continued support. So without further ado, I'll just hand over to our guest, Toby, and ask him to share a little bit about himself and tell you all about a bit of his background.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you very much, Hayden. Thank you for having me. I look forward to this conversation and many more to come. So my name's Toby Newman. I currently work for a company called Ear Technologies. We're a open location platform company, but I've been looking for in L&D for almost 20 years or so. I kind of have my own side hustles, what they call it in the Netherlands. It's where I'm based. I don't quite like the term side hustle. It's given a kind of a negative connotation, but there you go. And basically, I just kind of try as much as I can to share my own experiences, my own journey from being a kind of frontline trainer all the way up to kind of where I am at the moment, and just trying to encourage more and more people to think slightly differently within L&D if they haven't already, but also much more about the practical senses of doing things. So it's all very well and good for me to go, oh, everybody should be doing a learning culture, but what does that actually mean? What do you actually physically have to do to start, at least start doing something? And that's where I kind of like to, not necessarily niche, but that's where I like to sit in that kind of very much practical sense.
Thank you, Toby. Great stuff. Yeah, no, it's great. And I've been connected to Toby for a short while now. And if you didn't know, Toby's done a TED Talk, so do go onto his YouTube channel and check it out.
You like Jurassic Park?
Like Jurassic Park. It's a great talk, actually, so I will encourage you. Just a little bit of background noise. So if you can all just make sure that your mics are on mute, it'll just help with the conversation so we don't get that interference, if you wouldn't mind. That'd be really helpful. Thank you. So, Toby, thank you once again for joining us today. Really looking forward to this conversation, this discussion. So today's session is all about keeping ahead of the curve. So I just really want to know, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not going to take the credit of saying it's something I came up with, because I'm sure there's a lot more cleverer people out there that came up with it. But basically what I've tried to do is take two different curves and just explain how important it is that we have this kind of learning culture, which I know we'll talk about in a second. But in a sense, it is Moore's law, which is, now again, I'm not a scientist, but it is the exponential growth of transistors within computers. So it's how quickly computers speed up. I mean, if you're kind of my generation, you'll remember kind of floppy disks, and they're not table mats or anything. And going from like 8 bits and thinking, oh my God, it can go up to 16 bits. And now look at quantum computing. I mean, it's just crazy. And so what I've done is I've taken kind of that curve of that exponential growth. And then if we take the learning curve, and it's, that's kind of S-shaped, where you kind of have you get to know something, you accelerate your own learning, and then you become an expert, and it kind of tails off. But again, if I could draw it, it'd be easier, but it's basically, you've got exponential growth. So if you're, make sure I'm in the camera here. So if you're down here and learning something here, then you learn something and you're congratulations, you're an expert over here. But by that time, it's not only has it gone past your level of knowledge, it's gone into something completely different. It's gone into machine learning or cloud computing or whatever. And so it's the idea is that rather than traditionally kind of, doing this S curve of learning something, is the idea to try and keep ahead of this exponential growth. It's not easy. It's almost impossible, but it's if you have that mindset, and that's one thing I'll talk about a lot today is that mindset to think I need to keep on driving. That's kind of what I mean by ahead of the curve.
So I love that, and again, I'm sure we will definitely dig underneath this a little bit more as we go through today to see that, because I think it's it's a real challenge for us to how we do stay ahead of that curve when the curve is as exponential as you describe about. So tell us a bit more about so you've referenced kind of learning curves and you referenced about the curve itself. So tell us a bit more about kind of how you see that in practical terms. So that's kind of the theory. How do you see that in practical terms?
Yeah. Okay. So, and a lot of kind of maybe traditional trainers don't like hearing this. But for me, one of my biggest things is that as a trainer, we should be in that mindset of we no longer own the content. We no longer drive it. In the old skate, and I was one of those trainers that would be, I know everything about this particular topic, and I'm going to run workshops and I'm going to run training sessions, and you're going to listen to what I'm doing and you're going to do exactly how I do it, and you're going to go off and be experts yourself. And then the next group and the next group and the next group. But as technology moves so quickly, as everything in today's environment, and obviously with the COVID stuff, it doesn't help be that expert anymore. If you found a very niche area that you can say, I'm an expert in that, great, but you've got a very short time span. I guarantee that within maybe months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, that knowledge will be non-existent. People won't need that knowledge anymore because they've moved on to different topics. So it's that idea to say, let go. It's always, I feel like, the Star Wars and the Force, like, let go of your Force. And but it's more about embracing technologies, maybe not, embracing the process of always learning and figuring out a way to support others and bring that knowledge to others. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that to be a conduit rather than the source of knowledge. So what I see myself is, even though I work for a company, I name myself as a consultant, an in-house consultant. So the idea is that I identify and help subject matter experts, SMEs. I then help them to become better, and I ask them to know how to do video, to be able to get a script out, to be able to put their thoughts into a logical process of a training course. And then my job is then to take that information and make sure that everybody else knows about it. So kind of meet Mr. A, meet Mrs. B, oh, now you're connected, and that community then grows. So then I'm not holding on to any knowledge. Well, I'm holding on to the knowledge of being a good consultant. Maybe that's the best way of putting it.
So I'd love the couple of things that you've just shared there, which really resonated for me, and just Julia's put on the chat there, just around kind of the pressure that used to exist when we needed to be the expert and everything. A couple of things that really kind of come to me, which is, so the love of being the consultant, and that word consultant can really kind of resonate. And then I love your use of the word conduit, because we're often there's often this phrase that L&D becomes the curator. But actually, the conduit, I think, is a much more powerful phrase to use. So
yeah, when I think curator, I think of the actual content itself. So, when I talk about blended learning, and I'm sure everyone in this call knows everything about blended learning, probably a lot more than I do, but it's very much about taking created content and then blending it with curated content to be able to kind of go, there you go, and then just point them. I think you probably kind of said this a lot as well, is that we are marketing managers now. We are communication. I probably do more communication than actual training. And it's almost like it's a skill that as an L&D person, I probably am not trained in. And maybe that's something I should actually do more of and actually get official training in communication and marketing to be able to push these things. Because I think that's the future.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because one of the things that I've learned in my journey since I left the corporate world and went into running my own consultancy is that I'm a marketeer who happens to coach and deliver leadership development.
Yeah.
I'm not a leadership development specialist who happens to do marketing. It has to come the other way around, which is interesting. So I just want to, you mentioned a couple of times this kind of phrase or word around learning cultures. So I guess what I really want to know is, do learning cultures really exist, or is it just another buzzword to add to our bingo sheets?
If I'm being honest, it is. Now, obviously, you may kind of think, oh, no, it's important. Learning, I must admit, I actually hate the word learning culture, because it comes with a, how do I put it? It comes with a kind of like thinking that you weren't training or weren't learning before. Now I'm going to help you to learn. And that's BS. It's because we're all learning. I mean, from kids, we're constantly learning. For me, learning culture, and people refer to it as a learning mindset, lifelong learning. But the thing that that isn't used, which I think should be used, is conscious. So, for example, I'll give, maybe I'll put it out to the crowd that we've got here. Even if we all believe that we're all in this, learning mindset, is that I almost guarantee, if we exclude this session, that everybody in this call has taken a course in the last probably week, maybe even month, has read articles, read books on many different topics, not just in L&D. But again, let me put it out to the board, to the group. How many of you have actively shared that with your own peers or your own manager to say, I read a really interesting article last week about this. Let's talk about it. Or how many of you have shared that article, or so you've taken a course and actively shared it with somebody else that you think, you might actually like this because I liked it. And that's what I mean by a learning culture. It's not necessarily, oh, I need to start learning. It's about that conscious effort to say, not only am I need to learn, where am I going? So self-reflection, self-awareness is so important. What am I actually learning? I use the term synthesis that actually came out of higher education. And a synthesis, basically what it does, and I do this with every course, is a little snippet, is that take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and put on the left-hand side all the key takeaways that you took away from this course. Not what I want you to take away, but what you took away. And that could just be the way I presented. It could be the way somebody else said, not necessarily the content. And then on the right-hand side, you write down what action you are going to do to put that takeaway into place. So that's where the synthesis is. Not just key takeaways, it's an action against them. So that's one way to be conscious about doing things. Again, like I said, like consciously giving tips, sharing articles. Another good practical way is that in every team meeting, dedicate at the start, not at the end, because that shows that you kind of, it's just an add-on. At the start of every meeting, dedicate 5 minutes to what people learn. What was the last person somebody read or watched? What do they like about it? And dedicate time for that, and then kind of get on with the rest of the meeting or whatever. But it's just some practical things that you can say, takes the learning culture and turns it into something that people can actually do.
Yes, again.
Sorry, I like to rant. It's like I get passionate.
That it's good to get on a bit of a rant about something, because I think you're absolutely right. It's that synthesis that you talk about is where you translate it from being a passive process into an active process. And just seeing David come on the shot chat there saying that he's many times has shared stuff. So great stuff, David. You're clearly role modeling what we're looking to see, and it is that becoming active in that process, which I really like. So just want to reach out to everybody who's on the call. If you have got any questions for Toby, please do use the chat just to send them over. It'd be great to do those. We just got a question from Susan there.
Yeah,
I love that.
It can, when I'm So there's a couple of things. First of all, we're actually trialing a company called Get Abstract. I think Blinkist do the same thing, or a similar thing, where they take books and they kind of take it down to an abstract of 15 minutes and put it out as a video. I personally, whenever I see, for example, I was looking at Who Moved My Fish, Who Moved My Cheese, which is a kind of a marketing book. But when I pushed it out to the wider audience, I pushed out the book, so the PDF, where to buy the book, but I also sent out a YouTube clip that somebody was talking about it, and there was a TEDx talk that talked about it as well. So it's about not just, I've got to read a book and let's share it, but it's finding different ways to do it. But also, if you are a person that loves a book, and I'm a very, very slow reader. I love books, but I'm a very slow reader. So it might be that you take a chapter, or that you might kind of, as you're reading, just have a little notebook by the side of you, or use your phone's notebook to think, that's a great quote, or that's a great word, that's a great line. And then that I share, not the whole book. Just an example.
And I love that fact of that kind of alchemy that happens when you take some content that you've received, whether it be a book or a video or some information, and that gets mixed up with your own learning, knowledge, experience, and thoughts. And actually, those connections that you form, and when you articulate those to others, that can be really powerful as well. So one of the things I guess I'm really interested in, if we are going to talk about creating learning cultures or whatever we want to call them, is there's this kind of drive for people to take responsibility for their own learning. So this kind of sense of, shouldn't learners own their own self-development? So I guess one of my questions is that just a cop-out from the business that should be providing more meaningful learning for people, and maybe arming managers with the right skills to actively engage their teams? Or really should we be driving this real personal ownership of your growth?
No, it's a complete cop-out. I'm just a very lazy person, and I want to do as less work as possible. But in essence, it can be seen as that. And going back to what we said before about marketing and communication, is that you can't just say, right, everybody, we're going to drive self-development, and you're all going to be self-determined learners. Thank you very much. Goodbye. You just can't do that. So what you've got to do is, I always love to use the term we FM, like you tune into, nowadays you don't tune into radio signals, but if you tune into we FM, it stands for what's in it for me. And if you always have that mindset of, why am I doing this for the customer? What's the benefit to the customer? And that's another thing. I talk about customers, I don't talk about participants, because they are, if you have that customer centricity mindset, or the what's in it for me, whatever you want to talk about, is that if you think in that way, then rather than just saying, oh yeah, everybody should be a self-directed learner, what you're saying is, if you become a self-directed learner, it means that you have more control over your pace. It means you have more control over what you absorb and how you absorb it. This whole idea of people have different learning styles, I'm on the fence. I agree and I disagree in some areas, but like, for example, I love podcasts. I'm really big into podcasts at the moment. And I will much happily listen to a podcast doing something else than sit down and read a book. That doesn't mean that I'm a particular style. It just means that's my personal preference. So it means that if you give these things out, that's in different ways, people can absorb them differently. But it also means, as a trainer, as a learner, as a learning and development consultant, or whatever we want to call it, it means we can concentrate on other things. It means, rather than having to run workshop after workshop, and in the old days travel, but in these days at least prepare, it means that you can start to look elsewhere. You can, for example, look at alternative curated resources to push your point forward. You can look at new technologies, new platforms to be able to support your needs, rather than having to run the same workshop over and over again. And like we said before, it allows you to be a better consultant, a better communicator, and let the learners get on so that you can help them when they do need help.
So Absolutely, great points. Just Jen's just putting there, hold a weekly 30-minute meeting of sharing knowledge picked up during this week. It was fun, and sometimes totally random things would come out, increasing creativity levels too.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Because it gets to the point where like people want to, if you create a habit, and I'm a big believer of that, not big, it's an obvious thing, but creating habits around learning is something that we all need to do. And we can't just do it once. It needs to be over and over again. And those little snippets then start to grow other things. You think, oh, that's a great idea. We could try this and we could try this. And and it snowballs. But it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that discipline of 30 minutes in your session, or as you articulated earlier, starting off your meeting with 5-10 minutes where people just share some of their insights that they've gained over the last week, can be a great way for that to start.
And it is important to kind of go slow. I was actually talking to my missus about she talked about diets and fitness and all that kind of stuff, and we were talking about the idea that people jump into something, think, oh, right, now we're going to be a learning culture, right? Everything's going to be about learning. No, because otherwise you just go too fast too soon. You need to just drip feed it, kind of thing. Just do 5 minutes. If you're already doing a half an hour session, that's great. Keep that going. But if you haven't started anything, going from nothing to a half an hour session on right now, share with me what you've learned, you're like, oh, kind of thing. So you need to kind of start slowly and build it up and build it up and build it up.
Absolutely. And so I guess what I want to just get a little bit into is kind of the practical side of it. So again, we're kind of talking about kind of the broad concepts of this, but from some of your experiences, some of the things that you've done, how do you kind of practically start to build this into a way of being at an organizational level? So I can see it on individual team levels, but at an organizational level, how do you start to really kind of shift that?
So I'm a big believer in kind of bottom up meeting top down. Yep. So I'm trying to think of a couple of things. So as we said before, communication is the most important. So why are we doing this? What's your aim? So for example, in our company, we are transitioning, I suppose. I think we're all in transition at the moment, but we were conscious that we need to diversify our business model. This is all before kind of 2 years ago. And in order to keep up with technology, because we're an IT company in a sense, of knowing what is the most latest cloud computing and machine learning and AI and all that kind of stuff, we can't go down we forced ourselves to become this kind of learning culture or learning mindset. But we did it in a couple of ways. So first of all, we started to convert, and again, this is like over 2 years ago, we started to convert all our trainings into SPOCs, which stands for, so we maybe have heard of MOOCs, which is Mass Open Online Course. A SPOC is a small private online course. Mm-hmm. So it's basically taking these public MOOCs and then making a bit more, make more sense to the local company. And then so we started thinking about, well, what needs to go into this virtual course? What resources can we use? And then start to bring in curated stuff. So first of all, it's us making more resources than what were traditionally available. Don't let the platform be your solution. You should already have whatever it is, learning culture, learning mindset, whatever you want to call whatever you're doing, it should already be in place. The platform should just be there to speed it up or to improve it in a way. It shouldn't be, oh, I want to be a learning platform, so I'm going to go and get an LXP, and that's going to solve it. No. It'll be a lovely tool, but you've got to coach people in that mindset to be able to just regularly do it, and then the platform will just support it. In terms of other practices, I mean, I always kind of push towards, if I think of platforms, is I won't particularly push any one particular platform, but it's that LXP, that learning experience platform, rather than just relying on an LMS. Especially look out for ones that have open APIs or XAPIs. But basically all that means is it's, you hear a lot of terms, I hear this term, a single source of truth. In other words, that this is the home where we have all our learning, but our learning comes from LinkedIn Learning, from Biz Library, from this resource, from that resource, from TEDx, from Harvard Business Review, from all these different areas, and then it's just laid out for you so that you can kind of jump in and go, oh, I like that, I'll share this, I like that. And then the whole point of a good LXP as well will start using recommendation engines and think, well, if you like this, then you might like that. If you like that, then your peer will like that, and that, etc., etc., etc. So that platform allows you to expand, but it's that mindset beforehand rather than going on and what I'm trying to say. It's the mindset before, not relying on the platform to do your heavy lifting. I don't know if that answered your question, but
great stuff. Sorry about technology issues at this end as well, guys. So good to be back in the conversation. It sounded like I joined at a really good point where we were talking about kind of how we do that. So Richard just put on the chat there, started experimenting with Google Classrooms. Do you have any experience with this platform? So maybe anything
not with Google Classrooms. I'm assuming Google Classrooms are like a hybrid online collaboration. So we use Cisco WebEx. So we use WebEx Training, WebEx Meeting, WebEx Teams. WebEx Teams is basically like a Slack or an MS Teams. One of the things that I have just kind of actually guiltily not thought of before, but just got into, is these collaboration rooms. So, for example, Miro or Nueva, and I'm not talking Google Docs as in just one team can all work on the same doc at the same time. It's a collaboration white space. So if you haven't used it, Miro do free trials and stuff, but for me, it was just a eye-opener. It's a revelation, because what it allows you to do is put all your curated content inside a permanent platform, and allows the learner to just jump in wherever they want. They can take a bit of here, a bit of there, but also at the same time, everybody can collaborate. So you can put virtual Post-it notes on a brainstorming session, and then that can then lead on to another section and another section. I'm not an expert, because I know it's started off in this virtual agile world, because it's all about Kanban boards and all these kind of things. But and that's the reason why we started it, because our company's going agile. But it's something that the training world should really, really adopt and use as a best practice, because it's going to open up a whole new world to what we can actually deliver.
Because I think that's quite interesting and great question. Thanks, Richard, for that one. But I think it's really interesting, isn't it? There are so many other disciplines in our businesses that are advancing tools for their needs that actually L&D can take advantage of and learn from and use. So like your example of it's something that's designed around agile and kind of Kanban boards, but actually there could be other applications for it if we are just keep our eyes and our minds open enough to go discover it.
And that's what I was saying, kind of meant before, about this kind of, if you can get your team and your company to be self-developed, this is the kind of stuff you can actually spend time investigating and going, oh, this is great. I mean, like, for example, there's another great tool I found called Sissoko, which allows you to free time. Again, if you want to know like more of these tools, I would strongly recommend checking out a lady called Lisette Sutherland. She does collaboration superpowers. On a website, she gives you all these kind of tools and more. I actually did it was a host on one of her podcasts as well. But she is an absolute expert when it comes to this kind of thing. So Sissoko allows you in real time to know where people are. L-I-S-E-T-T-E. So I rather than a Y. But it allows people to see in real time where they are. So if you're in basically like a floor plan, and you can see, David is working on this project, and you can physically go up and knock on his virtual door and say, can I have a chat? Or you can set yourself in the coffee room, or you could set yourself in a private room to say, don't disturb me. There are other tools, things like, I know Zoom do it. I don't know if it's even available on this one, is that you can make your background blurry, or you can even do portable green screens. so you can then, kind of ignore all the back. So you don't have to have a studio to record your films. You can just do your own thing in wherever you are. But there's all these tools that are not necessarily used for training that you can go, maybe if I use that, maybe how can that, I wonder if let's try it. And boom, it becomes something great to use.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's just that being connected into the business to understand what they're using and then find out how you could apply it for yourselves.
It's amazing how many platforms and tools a company is actually using that L&D aren't aware of, because they thought, well, it's not training, they don't need to know. And you think, oh, this will be brilliant, kind of thing. So
yeah, absolutely. So I guess what I'm just interested to kind of have a look at as we go through, and again, keep the questions coming in, guys. So some good discussions and debates that that's bringing up there. So one of the things that I guess I'm kind of keen to think about is your view as to, as we come back to the start of the conversation, how we keep ahead of the curve. Now, as people are kind of coming into the workplace, and they're coming into the workplace with different knowledge, different experiences, different backgrounds to maybe how we joined. And a lot, particularly in the education system in the UK, we don't really teach people how to learn. We teach people how to gain knowledge and pass tests and retain knowledge for a short period of time to get through an exam. But we're not necessarily teaching the real life skills of how to learn. So what are some of your thoughts about how we best arm, particularly our new people coming into the workplace, with the skills of self-directed learners?
So for me, there's two things that I want to talk about there. First of all is that kind of testing, and I hate gamification with a passion. Apologies for anybody in the thing that they live by. I can't stand it. I honestly think, and again, well, apologies if this upsets anybody, but I honestly think gamification is just a way to make a boring training fun. It's like, why spend the time doing it gamification? Just spend more time making the actual training more engaging, that people will want to do it, not that they beat Fred from Singapore on their leaderboard. But yeah, I could go down a whole rabbit hole on that. So, and for me, testing is the same thing. I mean, we have an internal test for a lot of our mandatory stuff, like our code of conduct and stuff. All it teaches me to do is know the order of the right answer. I don't care about the actual answers. I just know, okay, A, B, C didn't work, so it's A, C, D, E. We've all taken multiple choice in the past at school, and you don't learn the stuff. You just learn the order, which is a different skill. So to me, there's a couple of things. First of all is that, and not just UK education, the world education, I think is a wrong place. And that's not their fault. I know some very, very good and related to a lot of teachers that are passionate. They're more passionate than I am in terms of education, and the patience they have. Yeah, that's a different story. But it's more about that when they got into education, the world was a very different place. And yes, they're trying to catch up. But it's almost like the teachers or the world of teaching needs to go into that learning mindset kind of way, because they can't be the experts anymore. I mean, think of just coding, machine learning, cloud computing, AI. I mean, I've got a 2-year-old, and one of the things that I really want to do is buy her a Pi, right? Is it the Raspberry Pi? I think it's the Raspberry Pi. It's basically a little kind of motherboard that you can code whatever you want. And that, even though if she hates coding, I don't care. But the fact that she can understand what is code, how to manipulate it, and how to change it. I mean, because like my manager and my kind of older peers, they struggle just with kind of turning on Zoom and knowing what button to click. And that's going to be a whole different thing when our kids kind of grow up. The other thing is not even within learning and stuff, but it's, and actually it was my wife that kind of pushed this on me, was that things like financing, how to own a mortgage, how to buy a car, how to, just simple, how to cook. I remember when I was lucky enough, I was in a private school. My parents thought that was the great thing to do, which is fine. But I went through a cooking class before I went to university. And that was probably one of the most useful courses I did. Because before that, it sounds stupid, but I didn't know how to cook for myself. Obviously, I watched my mum and I helped out and stuff, but just those practical senses. So I think it's a combination of understanding future technologies and trying to get that into schools and having that same mindset. In other words, the teacher shouldn't be training it. The teacher should be a consultant to say, hey, kids, go watch that TED talk. Go watch Bill Gates talk. Go watch, all these great scientists and see what they've got to say. And then let's discuss it. Let's have that, kind of discussion and whether we agree with it or not. And let's talk about practical skills that they can actually do in the future and not, like if you take maths, we've got a calculator. I mean, even writing, yes, it's important that I'm grateful that I had the basic English skills to know how to write a letter, how to form paragraphs and that kind of thing, and how to spell. But we've got auto assist, and nowadays you've got text to write, and by the time our kids get to work, I can imagine they'll probably never have to write in their life. Mm-hmm. And they probably wouldn't even need to know how to write down sentences and all that stuff, because AI will just do it for you. But if you listen to my TED talk, I kind of talk about that a bit more, and I kind of I take it to silly examples, but yeah, it's the kind of where I'm going with it.
But it's very true, because I was not long ago doing a session and doing the classic MBTI exercise of sign your name with your preferred hand and then the other one. And it was with a group of particularly young people. And when you go in, so how did you find that first one? I didn't say, I hardly ever sign my name. I never have to write my name.
I didn't know how to write with my actual right, let alone with my wrong.
Literally, they just, all of us who had maybe had that experience of a teenage years of practicing your signature. You want to be cool when you actually get to sign things. They'd never had that experience because they just really didn't need to sign that much stuff. So they'd never really bothered investing the time and energy. Yeah. So even that is changing, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, even now, even just the signature. I mean, it went from obviously paper signature, then it was sign a computer, and then you can take that and plonk it onto an e-signing document. But nowadays, it's all APIs. It's just auto-authenticate. You basically just put an X, I had one from HR yesterday that all it did was just have my name, just printed out, and by clicking it, I agreed to all the terms and conditions and blah 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 blah. I didn't actually sign anything.
And it shows how annoying or how the world has moved on, because I find it so annoying when I actually have to sign something off and print it out and send it back in the bay, because you just think, come on.
Yeah, like duplicates and 6 times this and all that kind of stuff.
So we just got a few minutes left. So again, if anybody's got any kind of questions that they'd like to ask Toby, final questions to ask before we close, and please ping them in. It'd be great to see them. But I've got just one kind of last question. Actually, before we go into that, just seen Josie's put in there. So I find the opposite at the moment in terms of sharing. Tons of articles, resources being shared in our comms tool, Slack, which is overwhelming our people and they're switching off. Whilst the volume is fantastic, what advice would you give to people to make sense of the massive navigation?
So very quickly, we use Yammer, which is a very similar tool. And we have the same thing. People stop using it because they get inundated. So the one thing we found was that we didn't actually train people how to use Yammer in the first place. Or Slack, or whatever tool you're using. So the first thing is, before you even launch it, and it sounds stupid to train something like that, but it's things like most people in our company didn't realize you could change the notification setting, so you only get notifications of the things you really, really want, and you can just say, I only want that group to give me once a week and that group once a month, but that give me straight away. So first of all, it's that kind of making sure that people know how to use the tool, and things like hashtags and all these kind of things to make it better. The other thing is it's a coaching thing, and it's not always easy, is to get people to think not in the old way of, everything you send me I've got to absorb and I've got to take in and I've got to do everything you tell me. It's no, I'm just going to give you a few different things, and you've got to train your own mind. Better, easier said than done, I know. you've got to train your own mind to think, yeah, I like that bit. I'm going to scan that document. Yeah, I like that sentence, but the rest of it I ignore. I like this. I don't like this. Yeah, and it's that self. I don't know what the best word of putting it is, but it's that kind of still get all the great information, but filter and make sure that their own mindset is not thinking you've got to learn this, you've got to learn that, you've got to learn that. It's that going back to that company culture of we're just going to give you all these resources. You've got to start to pick out. And going back to those, team building where you can put 5 minutes of your team, that's where you can start to say, right, did anybody find any of these resources that are useful? And everybody goes, no, they're all rubbish. And great, no problem. But then you can start to filter what you like.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of your comment from earlier about what's in it for me type of thing. Well, if I'm reading this document, what's in this for me? But it's a
big educational piece because yes, we need to change our own mindset, and it's going to take a long time for a company to start to realize. And you've got to find those people that do it really well and highlight them and testimonial them and get them to find out, share best practice. And it takes a lot of work to do. And we're not there by any stretch of the imagination. But I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last question for me, and again, I'll leave some space and time for anybody else to come in with any additional questions. But we talked a little bit about kind of role of L&D going forward, and I guess I just want to ask you, kind of as you project yourself into the future, and for us to stay ahead of the curve as a function and as a team and learning professionals, what's our role going to be? We've talked about kind of curation and we talked about conduits, but how do you see the learning function needing to adapt to stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a couple of different things. I mean, being a lot more marketing and communication driven, so that we're not in that caught in that kind of experts of this area. I don't think we should be technological experts because I don't know about APIs. I just know the basics of what they are. But things like, for example, I strongly believe that chatbots are, at least in this short future, is where it's at. Is that you can, but it's important that we know as L&D people how to program, not actual code, but actually kind of build a program behind it, so that when a user goes onto a chatbot and goes, "Hi, I'm looking for this," it will start to find the right things because you programmed it. So I think we need to be, if I was, two things, it would be communication, marketing, I think go hand in hand, and then just being a better tool, technology savvy. Not a coder, it's great if we are, but it's that kind of general mindset rather than deep diving into specific topics.
Brilliant. Thanks, Toby. So we've got a question coming from Julia there, which is different generations may struggle in keeping ahead of the curve as the world has changed so fast now. So how can we ensure that everyone keeps aware of the benefits, especially as they near retirement? So perhaps people later in their...
I think that's that. I mean, so there's a lot of focus on onboarding, and offboarding maybe, but retirement, there's very little on, and that's a big mindset. It's almost... it can be related to the current mindset of, we've just gone from working in an office to working at home. And you've got to figure out your new routines and all those kind of things. So it's finding niches like that, and then working out, right, what do you actually need to do it, and then building a program around it. And I know that doesn't answer everything, but obviously there's so much more that goes into that. Just on the bit of the millennials and Generation Y and Generation X, we actually did, so Aidan, you came on one of our Spark sessions. We actually did a Spark session on intergenerational learning. So a company actually specializes in how do other generations help other generations to learn off it. So rather than us telling the baby boomers to go, come on, you've got to be faster, we get the millennials to go, well, what are they into? How are they using social media and sharing? And then sharing that with them rather than us being the kind of the boogeyman.
So I love that. Again, I think David put a comment earlier about actually the talent within the organisation and using that to to
So important.
Yeah, great example. So great question from Susan there. So do you have any tips for organisations with many people without tertiary education who may find themselves lost the pull method? So a lot of people get very, I guess, settled and comfortable, and maybe that desire to want to learn gets lost. So think about
Tertiary education, we mean like kind of the traditional old school.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I'm trying to think. So like my mum, bless her cotton socks. So yeah, she is about as technophobe as she possibly can. But there isn't a right way or wrong way to do it. I think it's just, again, going back to that, what's in it for them. Like with my mum, I helped her to use FaceTime and WhatsApp video for the first time. And it wasn't just saying, Mum, you got to do this. You know, all the kids are doing it. She's like, yeah, whatever. But if I said, Mum, if you don't do this, you're not going to see your grandkids for months. And she's like, yeah, okay, now I've got a motivation to do it. So it's that understanding, what is their motivation, why do they need to do it? And then usually the rest of it comes, not easier, but it's kind of easier to build around once you know that motivation.
Yeah, and I think Susan points relating to also people who are perhaps not used to or in the practice of learning as a way of going about their everyday job. So it's not something that's in the forefront of their mind. How do we light the spark? How you use spark sessions in your business? How do we light the spark for people who perhaps lost the habit of learning?
Yeah, and just to comment on Susan, when talked about kind of low skilled, I think there is maybe a, you know, kind of, especially if you go through education, and I've been very fortunate to go through, you know, private schools and university and all that kind of stuff. A lot of the times, though, it really doesn't mean diddly squat. If you've got somebody that's low skilled, but they've had a hell of an upbringing and they've had stories, the number of stories that when I was doing training sessions, that are kids and, you know, kind of young adults that have had either troubling upbringings or interesting, should we say, the stories they can tell. And I know it's maybe corny, but stories are that's what we do. We make stories. We make training. You know, training is a story. So if you've got somebody that has experienced all these things, and you can get that information out and tell them that you've got a great story, now just convert that information into a different way of putting it. If anything, they've probably got a better chance than maybe some of these people that have gone to university for 4 years and never seen real life. I know that's not true, because university itself is a different level of education. But I hope you see my point.
Yeah, again, I think it's a really valid point, a great question from Susan. And I think one of my favourite podcasts is the Finding Mastery podcast by Michael Gervais. And on there, the majority of people he interviews have had some kind of troubled background, which has led them to be as great as they are. And it's their stories they tell, which is far more insightful than any education system they've been through, because they've learned to grow through some of the adversity or some of the difficult situations. So,
obviously, while we're waiting, if you haven't already, feel free to kind of link with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to either have, one-to-ones or further discussions on any of this, or just kind of ping me or whatever, and I'm happy to answer, or not answer. Makes it sound like I'm the expert. I'm not, but happy to have the discussion.
I would definitely recommend you to connect with Toby. Some of the work he's doing in his business, some of the Spark sessions that I've had the fortune to support with, are great ways of really bringing this to practical reality. So I would definitely encourage you to check out Toby and connect with him, and maybe take him up on that offer of a discussion if this is something relevant to you. So I just want to say thank you all once again for joining us this morning. It's been great. Toby, a really special thank you for giving your time this morning. It's been brilliant to hear your thoughts.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for everybody for their time.
Yeah, got some good thumbs up from around the room, so I think there's been some real resonance with people, which is lovely to see. Real big thank you for everybody else for coming on the session this morning. I just want to let you know that, as always, our Wellness Wednesdays, 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, you should get a link to that. You're more than welcome to come and have a chat. We literally just chew the fat for an hour, have a chat about how our weeks are going and how we're all thriving or surviving, whichever it is, in lockdown. So come and join us if you are around on Wednesday morning for just a virtual coffee. So thank you all. It's been brilliant to see you all. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day and a fabulous week, and look forward to seeing you again in another one of our Brain Food community events. So thanks all, and thanks again, Toby.
My pleasure.
Thanks, guys. See you all soon.